Before we get into the style of El Toro, I kind of want to set the tone for this video. And I want to show you a video. It's a TED Talk by Benjamin Zander. Benjamin Zander, of course, is a great musician, performer, conductor, but he's also really good at interpreting music, and he's able to communicate that interpretation to his orchestras and to his students. You know, what does this piece have to say, and how do we say it? He has a really high-level musical understanding of this, and I'm going to play a little video for you from his TED Talk so that you kind of understand his philosophy, and then we're going to sort of apply that to El Toro and hopefully every piece of music that your students play. So here we go.
I want to remind you of what a 7-year-old child sounds like when he plays the piano. Maybe you have this child at home. He sounds something like this. Now, if he practices for a year and takes lessons, he's now 8 and he sounds like this. And then he practices for another year and takes lessons, now he's 9. And then he practices for another year and takes lessons. Now he's 10. At that point, they usually give up. If he'd waited for one more year, you would have heard this. The first time, he was playing with an impulse on every note. And the second, with an impulse every other note. The 9-year-old put an impulse on every 4 notes. And the 10-year-old on every 8 notes. And the 11-year-old, one impulse on the whole phrase. So the music pushed me over, which is why I call it one buttock playing. Can be the other buttock.
But I hope you get Benjamin Zander's point here. You don't want to have your students smashing the downbeats, and that's very easy to do here in El Toro, especially with the double down bows that we sometimes have. And what we don't want is what he calls multiple impulses throughout the phrase, is what I call climaxes in the phrase. I refer to the impulse as something else, but we understand his point. You know, they speak a different language over there in England. But anyway, we don't want this piece to be la 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 ti do la 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 la. You know, you get it, right? We want to have a continuous 4-bar phrase to where we're building up to the downbeat of measure 3 and then coming back, and we can't do that if we're just smashing all of these notes. So if you have your students highlighting certain notes on the phrase, either through improper technique or that they don't have the musical understanding of this, it's not going to make it sound very musical. If we have them smashing all these downbeats here, that's not going to sound good. We want them to build up, and then they come back, and then we start a new phrase here. And you don't want to start the new phrase as loud as you can possibly play, because then you have no room to grow through the phrase. So you might be thinking to yourself, all right, teaching orchestra guy, listen, I'm just here, you know, to make sure my kids can get to the end of this without falling apart. Why should I care about phrasing? Well, if you caught that other part that Benjamin Zander said in the video is, if they don't start developing phrasing at a certain point, that's when they quit. And so if you want to increase your retention and you want your kids to stay in orchestra for the next year and the next year and the next year, get them to start phrasing as soon as possible, and then they'll learn how to play music and not just notes. And that's what keeps them in orchestra. In measure 57, it can be especially challenging style-wise because we have an accelerando and a crescendo that goes through 8 measures, not just 4. Extending this an additional 8 measures might be a little trickier. When they take the DC, they also have to understand that they're going back to measure 1, and that's a new phrase. So they're getting louder, getting louder, getting louder, getting louder, smash right at the beginning of the first phrase again. That's not going to work. So they crescendo, and then they're going to have to dial it back a little bit so they can create another phrase, measures 1 through 4. You know, this piece is supposed to be about a bullfight, right? And if we're creating climaxes all over the place, it sounds more like a bull running through a minefield. Your students might like that idea better, but I'm going to tell you right now that PETA might have something to say about it. And for those of you in PETA watching this, there are absolutely no animal products used in making this video. Well, except for me, but I'm here voluntarily because I'm trying to sell my teaching companions, available on teachingorchestra.com. Other style considerations for El Toro are on the long notes. Now, how do we want to sound on the long notes? Do we want them to be thin and weak and scared? No, because that's not what a bullfighter should sound like. Bullfighters are very confident, and so we have to play our long notes with heavy bows, and we have to be proud and dignified. And so I have my students play with molto vibrato when we're playing the dotted half notes. I mean, would you ever fight a bull with straight tone? I sure wouldn't. The other thing that I would try to get your students to do during the long note values especially is use motion. And by that I mean I want them to move their bodies when they bow. And if you want some help teaching this or you need some ideas about how to stage technique to develop motion in your orchestra, go to Season 2, Episode 6. Motion will also help with your retention. It feels good to move. Students like to move when they play. It's one of the advantages that we have over band and choirs. If they start moving around, you know, their directors get all bent out of shape, whereas we encourage motion because it's technically sound and there are practical reasons why we do it. And yes, I mean practical ways to move. That's one area of disagreement that I have with Dr. Zander, where he says, you know, the music pushes him over. I think it's the opposite. I think that we move to push the music, not the other way around. We're in control, and the audience should be moved by our music, but we should move practically because it makes our tone sound better. So how dare you challenge Benjamin Zander? Yeah, I get it. He's a genius, but he probably hasn't taught beginning strings in a while, so. In any case, have your students move, encourage them to move, be a one-buttock player. El Toro goes pretty quick for younger students. Dotted half note equals 60. Can they get it up to that tempo? In the next video, I'm going to go over some left-hand strategies on how to develop good technique while playing fast. Hope to see you in the next video.